you. All right, hey folks, welcome back from coffee break and to our second round of talks. I'm very excited to introduce Jonathan Roberts from Northwestern, who'll be telling us about comparing eccentricity distributions of brown dwarfs and planets. I'm excited that we're in an era where we can actually do that statistically significantly. So looking forward to your talk.
All right, thank you. Yes, so hello everybody. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Jonathan Roberts, and yes, I am a part of Jason Wong's group at Northwestern. Although not on the slide, none of what you see today will happen without the entire directly imaged community, my wonderful research group, and the entire exogravity collaboration, and literally everybody in this room. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And yes, I'll be talking about exoplanets, brown dwarfs, or eccentricities, and can they tell us anything about how they form? Let's see. So I'll talk about core accretion and then gravitational instability first, because that's part of their formation. And so for core accretion, we have a host star and a protoplanetary disk, and inside this disk you have dust and gas. The dust coagulates, and then the gas then accretes onto that dust. The planets that we see, usually we're assuming less than 13 Jupiter masses, and the eccentricities for these are pretty circular. And so we're trying to use the eccentricity to kind of tell us about the formation of these systems. And so next then, we have the gravitational instability model, where you have a host star, you have a protoplanetary disk. But with these, because the physics in the disks, the dust kinks up, and then you create a whole bunch of planets and call them brown dwarfs later on. And then as time continues, maybe they interact with each other. And then as time moves on, when we go to observe, we see that the eccentricities, these are pretty moderate to pretty highly eccentric. And then the question is, okay, why? And our base assumption right now is assuming that the brown dwarfs interacted probably with each other. Some got ejected, and so you're left with one object that's pretty moderately eccentric. Doesn't mean that there can't be others in the system. But the question is, I keep saying eccentricity, but I've got to figure out how do we find the eccentricity? And we do this thing called orbit fitting. We've heard it before in previous talks, but what's really cool about what I've done is that by using gravity, the thing that's really interesting is that when we include gravity data in the orbit fits, the orbit itself is much more constrained than it otherwise would have been. This is HR 3549b. Come on, work for me. There we go. And this appeared in, this orbit fit appeared in Bowler et al. 2020. This is about a 45 plus or minus 5 Jupiter mass object. And these down here are the eccentricity plots. So the probability is a function of eccentricity. And as we include gravity data, the eccentricity really then gets constrained, which is a key point into what I'm doing. And so this is really interesting to us because we're using the eccentricity to help us tell us about the formation of these objects that we see. And so has somebody ever tried to do a population level analysis of these objects? The answer is yes. So Bowler et al. 2020 decided we're going to pick objects between 10 and 100 AU. We're going to perform these orbit fits for all of these objects, which is this plot on the right. We're going to do this crazy thing called hierarchical Bayesian modeling, say that 5 times fast, and then come to find out that there is a difference in the eccentricity distribution of brown dwarfs and giant planets. This is crazy to me, right? I started Jason's group, we started talking about this paper, and I'm like, this is insane. In the best way, because if we're going to use this as a determining factor of whether these were formed differently, these better be different. If they're not, then we have some other questions to ask. And so they do this thing called our hierarchical Bayesian modeling, and the B, Bayesian, means that you have to use priors in order to do this. And what they use for this little alpha and beta here, I'm sorry if it is hard to see in the back here, but they throw a uniform distribution on this alpha and beta, and then find that there is a difference in the eccentricity distributions. So the question is then, okay, it happened in 2020. Is using a uniform prior actually the best choice? No, unfortunately it wasn't. But What's interesting, though, is still that the eccentricity distributions, in this case is the probability density as a function of the eccentricity for image planets and brown dwarfs, Vignesh Nagpal in 2023 et al. Found that by using a uniform, uniform, Gaussian, and then a log uniform prior, the answer changes depending on the prior you use. If this ever happens to you, this is kind of an issue, given that if your answer changes based off your prior, then there's some kind of like yellow or red flag that's happening. And so while it totally doesn't matter way too much, because the eccentricities are basically near circular, whereas if you compare them to the brown dwarfs, they're all moderately eccentric. So, okay, well, we still find that the image planets and brown dwarfs form differently, but we still kind of prior biased, which is kind of an issue. And Nagpal 2023 used the same number of brown dwarfs that Bowler did, used the same subsample, and then found that using the Gaussian distribution was the least biased. And so it is now 2026, and my PhD is totally focused on trying to Slack message, email, go up face-to-face to the entire directly image community as much as I can, and then try to amass more of these orbit fits. And so I did 17 of these total objects that we have now. In total, we have 43 brown dwarfs and 22 total exoplanets. There are a few that I saw at the next poster session that I'm going to have to ask about, so be tuned, you will see my face eventually. And so what we've done then is, for all of these, perform the orbit fits again, and this is what our sample looks like now. One of the things I'll note is that these really high eccentric peaks for these brown dwarfs, they've been kind of removed, and this is, in part, this is thanks to gravity, so thank you very much, the entire team, of course. And so my mission in Jason's group is, now let's try to do literally the exact same thing Bowler et al. Did again, and Vignesh did. Come to find out that there is, if I use a uniform prior, I will come back to this, if I use a uniform prior, the probability density for the directly imaged planets versus the brown dwarfs does change, and it is still different, even with my entire now sample. I just spent like 2 minutes talking about how using priors changes your result. This is somewhat of an issue. So you're probably asking me, okay, well, what does it look like when you have every prior? Turns out that, yes, it does not change. We are not prior biased. And when I got this, and I sent it to Jason, I got, ooh, right? And so the moment I saw this, it was me in my apartment. I was screaming and jumping for joy, because this is really interesting, given that with the entire subset of samples that I have, and I tried to get every directly imaged object by doing the orbit fits, doing the same HBM analysis, we're not prior biased anymore. And so let's sit and kind of think now, what does this mean? What does this tell us about the formation of these systems, or these objects? And so in my view, I'm thinking that for the planets, probably formed via core accretion still, and for the brown dwarfs, gravitational instability. And the key that I think is really interesting about these is that we're assuming that the brown dwarfs themselves had interactions which created this moderate eccentricity. They probably didn't just form individuals by themselves and create the moderate eccentricity by themselves. So this is kind of the thinking, but this, I should also mention that in each of these 3 plots for the planets, this dashed line here is the alpha and beta for the Kipping 2013 result for the radial velocity planets. So this makes sense, given that the radial velocity planets we see are closer into their host stars, and so the closer in planets, the eccentricity distribution should match what we have, and they do. So green check mark for me. Okay, I didn't discover something totally random. But for the brown dwarfs at the bottom row here, I wonder if some papers ever tried to, maybe some theorists somewhere has ever tried to match this. or I've tried to match any theorist, and the answer is yes. So in SHIB 2025, they performed a disk instability population synthesis analysis, and they find that the objects that are left, the brown dwarfs that are left, have a moderate eccentricity. And when I saw this paper, and I saw what I have, biggest grin you've ever seen in your life, I swear. This is awesome. So again, I'm not just sitting here finding something random. We're actually working with theorists and observers agreeing that, okay, the brown dwarfs have a moderately eccentric profile. And so what's next, another thing I tried is, in my entire system, I have multi-planet and single-planet systems. So why not try doing the same HPNM analysis? Well, because of the number of multi-planet systems I have, I'm prior biased. So not fantastic, but at the end of the day, I kind of expected this, didn't want to expect it, but this is what it is what it is. But if I take kind of a gander at what I see, either way, we have pretty circular, and then getting close to moderate, but then still kind of leaning towards more circular, which makes sense given the entire sample that I have. So rather interesting stuff, and so I guess I have about a minute and change left, so I'll leave my conclusion slides and then kind of we'll free range with questions. So thank you.
Thanks for leaving plenty of time for questions. I see in the back already.
Jonathan, hi. Congratulations on the great work. I'm the bowler from the Bowler 2020. So phenomenal stuff. When we did our study, we made an arbitrary cut because we had so few targets at 13 Jupiter masses. Have you looked to see if there's a dynamical distinction or sliced it in a greater number of bins than just 2?
So yes, I presented what I had last week to Sierra, and when there is a difference, and I don't mind showing it to you, just the answer is that because of the split, what I did is I also included brown dwarfs in with the giant planets, and if I'm going to stand up here and basically say that there's a difference between the two formations, I should probably do 1, 2, 3, and 4 different analyses, one for the brown dwarfs. I think they're all probably pretty far out anyway, so kind of may or may not be useful, but I think more work for me on my end still has to be done with it. But yes, there is a difference in the eccentricity distributions when you split, when you do split. So.
Really great talk, Jonathan. This is super exciting to see, and a culmination of a lot of hard work, I imagine, on your part. I was really interested in the subtle difference between your median eccentricity for planets and the Kipping result, and I was wondering if you could just speculate wildly on that. How many more observations at gravity precision might you want to, see if there's a difference between these two? I can imagine RVs are older, giant, imaged planets are younger. Maybe there's some enhancement over time in eccentricities. What kind of data do you want to sort of parse this distribution even more?
I guess in a perfect world, maybe somehow built instruments, this would take a long time, I think, but built instruments such that we can look at older systems too, given that all the directly imaged objects we see are in younger systems. Whether that may or may not play a role, I have to do kind of a deeper analysis, I guess. I think so I think that also plays a role, and I think also basically adding as many systems in totality as humanly possible, I think it is really the end goal for something like this. So yeah.
Excellent talk. So there's some thought that actually mass ratio is more fundamental to whether or not something is a planet versus a brown dwarf, and other literature suggesting that the turnover from planets to brown dwarfs is at higher masses than substantially higher masses than 13 Jupiter masses. So I was wondering whether you still see this bifurcation with mass ratio, and at what division would you change where you could get the differences in the populations to go away?
So I have not yet tried doing the split with mass ratio. So right now I'm totally kind of I'm going to say I don't know right this second, but I will not be sleeping tonight because I will find this for you really fast. It's not that hard. Just lots of coding and lots of not sleeping, and maybe some caffeine mixed in. So.
Excellent. Well, great. Well,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Jonathan, again for a very